All right, welcome to our second session. I'd like to introduce Dr. Emma Catherine Perry, Director of the Writing Center at the University of Idaho. She has an MFA in poetry from Cornell University and a PhD in English from the University of Georgia. Her first book of poetry was published in 2023, and her research focuses on student-centered writing pedagogies. Miriam Åkervall is the Associate Director of the Writing Center and a lecturer in English at the University of Idaho. They are also a poet and translator. Miriam is the 2025 through 2027 Moscow Poet Laureate, and their translation of Ostrakanarna, The Garden of the Dead by Murray Lundquist is forthcoming with Ugly Duckling Press.
Oh, yeah.
How we do in Moscow, Idaho? What's up? All right, we are not necessarily accustomed to microphone usage, so we will try our very best. Thank you so much, Kristen, for managing the slides and for the introduction. I'm Emma, Director of the Writing Center here at the University of Idaho, here with Miriam, Associate Director. And we are excited to get started. We'll go ahead and just go to our next slide right off the bat. Okay, so first we have an icebreaker. Don't we love it? Just to kind of practice getting our voices in the room. This is an interactive workshop, so getting a little warmed up sounds like a good idea. Because there are so many people in the room, we might not necessarily have a chance to go around and get everybody's name. We encourage you to turn and talk to the two people sitting closest to you and answer the following questions. What is your first name? What department or program are you a part of? And what kinds of writing are the students with whom you work doing? Okay, just take a couple minutes. Couple more seconds, and then I'd like to hear from the group what kind of writing you're seeing your students doing. I'll ask folks to share out of time. Okay, I'll put you on the spot. What kinds of writing do your students do?
Well, Paul's students write grant proposals.
There you go. Nice. Cool. How about over here? What types of writing do you see students doing?
My students write lessons, I guess.
Yes, as I pass tutors. Yeah, absolutely. How about over here? What kinds of writing are your students doing?
Whenever I do improv discussion, write like a discussion question.
Oh, okay, yeah, cool. Like on Canvas, kind of using that, or how do you work that?
I have to set it up a little bit different for Canvas.
Yeah.
They're not doing any classes. Exactly.
Right.
We'll do like interaction with the
Cool, right on. Okay, so we've got some high stakes writing grant proposals over here, some kind of daily workaday writing, kind of lesson plan working, and then some sort of engagement oriented low stakes in class writing over here too, it sounds like. Awesome. How about over here? What kind of writing are your students doing?
Emails.
Emails, yes. We have that in common with our students. This week has been so busy, we've been commiserating about the emails waiting for us. Cool, thank you. All right, why don't we go to the next slide?
All right, so we're just going to give you a little bit of a preview here. We just did the icebreaker, and here's where we're thinking we'll spend our time together in this space today. We're going to tell you a little bit more about who we are and how our services work at the Writing Center, how we're coming to this conversation about writing in the classroom and writing specifically with AI in mind. And then we're going to talk a bit about what we're seeing on campus. So how are our students showing up and engaging with artificial intelligence as part of their writing process? Is this too loud? Am I holding you too close?
No, it's very good.
Great, thanks. And then we'll transition a little bit into how the writing process can step into this conversation. Why use writing in the classroom, even if it's not the primary genre that you're working in? Really interested in having this discussion with you all. And then our plan for this conversation today is for everybody to leave with some concrete takeaways. So we're going to brainstorm some strategies and some lessons that you can incorporate into the classes that you're already teaching and the material that you're delivering right now. So.
Right, and so we are from the Writing Center. Whenever you email writingcenter@uidaho.edu, it's just me and Miriam. We are the people behind that curtain. And as a division, as a program, the Writing Center is a division within the English department that actually serves the entirety of the Vandal community. Not only do we not work exclusively with English students, we work with students in every single department. Actually, about 30% of our appointments are done with students in the College of Natural Resources. But we also offer workshops, classes, group events designed to help writers build writerly efficacy, to build skills and community around their writing. While we conduct research and do other sort of public-facing activities, our primary service, our keystone service, is one-on-one tutoring. And we offer this service to everybody who has a vandals.uidaho.edu email. We work with undergraduate students, high school students, dual credit students, incarcerated students through the Prison Education Initiative. We also work with alumni, graduate students, postdoctoral researchers, faculty, staff, you name it, we got you. And we also provide instructional support for our teachers. We provide support through curricular development, lesson planning, assignment design and sequencing. We also offer push-in classes. So we'll collaborate with faculty and staff to design tailored workshops to actually target the writing that your students are doing.
Okay, and so we also wanted to take a minute and share a little bit of our history when it comes to how we're working with students who are engaging with artificial intelligence as part of their writing process. And this has changed a little bit over the past few years. So for the past 2 or 3 years, from 2023 to 2025, our main strategy when it comes to beginning these conversations with the writers who come into the Writing Center is to take a non-judgmental stance. So our policy fundamentally is to support decision-making and agency on the student's part. This means that it's not really our job to police whether or not they've broken their syllabus, which is something that we definitely want to emphasize, both for the students and for their instructors. We don't report out to instructors, we don't report out to administrators. Rather, we are there to help foster agency and decision-making. And so this might mean that tutors will ask writers and students to identify how and why AI is entering their writing process. The way this has looked in the past is that appointments are very conversational in this way. We have asked writers to self-identify if they're incorporating AI in their writing process. Of course, the reality is that they don't always do that. But that's generally the way that we have historically approached these conversations. We've also collaborated with the Dean of Students. So historically, what would happen if somebody was found responsible for an academic dishonesty violation or a misuse of AI specifically, they would be referred to us to have an in-person one-on-one meeting. We found, though, after a couple of years of this, that these particular students would infrequently return to utilize our resources. So didn't feel like the most efficient strategy. So in 2026, Emma took the initiative to pivot our approach here a little bit, and we founded the Alternatives to AI Repeating Workshop. This is something that we've hosted once already and plan to host again multiple times per semester. And really what this is a forum for conversation. It's a way to bring students together to share some critical skills about how to re-engage with their own critical thinking during these processes and to identify how and why they're leaning on these tools in a way to offload their own cognitive engagement with what they're being asked to do. We'll get into a little bit about what our findings were from this, but just to preface, what we find is that these have been really productive conversations and really popular. They were super well attended and had interesting effects on how students were coming back to the Writing Center. So again, bottom line, we respect the students' right to either engage or not engage with AI. We really prioritize creating an environment where students feel safe asking questions and also coming to the conversation honestly about how they're using this tool in their writing process.
All right, so we can go ahead and so recent research has suggested, and our experience has confirmed, that while AI use is really widespread throughout education, student opinions of and reactions to generative AI are incredibly varied. Drawing on data gathered by the International Writing Centers Association, as well as researchers at the University of Pittsburgh, we may safely assume that upwards of 80% of our students are using AI for coursework at least once. However, this utilization is very nuanced and complex. In addition to reporting that they assume their fellow students are using AI, students in these research studies also report that they do not believe their instructors can actually detect their AI use. We know that these beliefs have contributed to a corrosion of trust and shared accountability between students and professors. Furthermore, students report feeling shame and frustration with their own AI use. They report feeling forced into it. At our first Alternatives to AI workshop in January, we spoke with 35 students from across campus about their opinions and questions on AI. Students reported feeling confused and frustrated with a lack of clear guidelines, and they feel indignant. This was like an emotion we were a little surprised by. They're indignant. They want their education back. They know that offloading the cognitively challenging parts of their learning can lead to the atrophy of the skills they have already worked so hard to acquire. They're here to learn more, not less. Many undergraduate students also express deep concern for the impact on the environment by the energy consumption of huge data centers used to power AI. We had a really neat little knot of CNR students in this workshop, and they found the environmental reasoning like very compelling for not to use AI. So, we're in Idaho, we value our resources. This is something our students are thinking about quite actively. So, what do? It may seem even more challenging to incorporate writing into a class now that we also have to think about the presence of AI. Anecdotally, I've spoken with many professors at this and other universities who are starting to require handwritten assignments. I've got a friend in New Hampshire who's back to blue books. For faculty who may already have been hesitant to incorporate writing, concerns about plagiarism from AI use may be enough to just make them want to chuck the whole endeavor. Adding AI detection on top of reading, responding, and grading to student written assignments is just too much for people. It is, and we're exhausted. People are already burned out. So today we're offering an opportunity to adapt. Writing matters for our students, and we're here today to advocate for incorporating writing into classes to support students in their learning, in their ability to advocate for themselves and others, and in their abilities to grow into the thinkers and professionals they want to become.
Okay, so now we want to take an opportunity for us to reflect a little bit in writing. So please describe a time your writing made something happen for you or the people around you. And this could be anything like academic writing, like a dissertation or a grant proposal, personal writing, like an op-ed or a text message or an open letter to someone in power. So
A risky email.
yeah.
All right. Take a couple seconds to finish up. Oh, sorry. Take a couple seconds to finish up. And then I invite you to turn and talk to the folks you just introduced yourself to earlier in our session and share a little bit about the writing that you did that made something happen for you or someone you know.
Okay, let's hear a couple of examples. Can we hear from this side of the room? What did y'all talk about? Sure, go ahead, Kel.
On a university related one, I write a lot of letters of support for students petitioning and academic as well. But one that I think is more impactful is I write a lot of emails to students telling them I'm proud of them because they don't have someone telling them that. And I think that's really important part of it.
Nice. That made something happen. I love it. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. Yeah. Can I get a couple more people? Somebody want to share? Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I've been in grant writing for a lot of years, and I think my first grant, my second grant. I used to work at the camp program at Lewis Clark State College, and there was an institutional development grant, and we had very limited funding at the time, and so the first time I wrote it, it was a grant for a few computers for our study lab, and I didn't get it, and then I kind of took a step back and I looked at it again, and I was like, how can you do this better for next year? And then I wrote it next year, tweaked it, tightened it up a whole lot, and then got all the computers and all the money to go with it. And I was just so ecstatic. And that just kind of opened up the doors like, oh, grant writing, that's kind of cool. So yeah.
Oh, that's great.
That was my favorite one.
Wow. Yeah, that's great.
The Writing Center needs computers, so I'm going to talk about how we can make this hustle work. Yeah.
Well, I have to say that in the process of like academic writing, this is dissertation. So, and I need to say thank you to the Writing Center because every time that I have stuck in my writing, so they are willing to help me. So, yeah, sometimes it's kind of frustrating me not to have my ideas very clear, but you guys.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Gloria. Appreciate that. Cool. Thank you all so much. Appreciate that. Now we can go to our next slide. Thank you all for sharing these stories. I think sometimes it can be a shift. It can represent a paradigm shift for us and for our students to think about writing as power, writing as a method for creating and changing the material realities of our lives. Writing can seem like a chore. Writing for our students often seems like a hoop through which we're asking them to jump. However, writing is more than just an onerous task. And I know we're from the Writing Center and we're biased, but we really believe this. Writing can be a mechanism through which we can create change in our lives and in our homes. So these three ideas we've identified as rather important ideas for our purposes today: writing to actualize, to advocate, and to learn, are specific to writing that is undertaken by people, addressed to people. These are writing outcomes that are achieved not through simply having a finished product of writing, a written thing, but rather having undertaken the manual and cognitive processes that writing entails. The first of these three outcomes is self-actualization. Other writers may use other similar terms like enculturation or socialization here. I've decided to go with self-actualization because it implies a gentle choice-making on the part of the student writer. Writing and pedagogy scholars have long postulated that writing in the disciplines is essential for enculturating or socializing students into their academic and professional identities. Writing in a discipline epitomizes ways of knowing, working, and collaborating. Learning to write in a discipline is learning to think, to work, and to communicate with others in that disciplinary community. So by learning to express yourself like a scientist in a way that's recognizable and understandable to other scientists, you're on your way to becoming a scientist. By developing literacies in the key genres of engineering, by developing the facility to manipulate document templates according to rhetorical situations, for example, you draw closer to being a professional engineer who can communicate effectively with relevant stakeholders. I always feel bad going into our STEM classes whenever we're giving a presentation, because I know that a lot of the folks in the room thought they were going to get out of writing for their college careers. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's still here. I also prefer the term self-actualization here because it doesn't assume that this enculturation will be totalizing or even effective. Students can also reject the tenets of disciplinary culture that they encounter, and this can bring them closer to a positive statement of their identity through a kind of process of elimination. So it's still valuable. The students who choose to remain active in the disciplines they encounter in college, whether they go on to graduate school or into a professional field related to their academic discipline of choice, may find themselves balancing this enculturation with self-actualization through the choices that they make in their writing. As Jonathan Monroe writes in the preface to his book, Writing in the Disciplines, when students write within particular disciplinary contexts, the self they bring to the diverse practices of disciplinary writing becomes at once suspended, dispersed, and concentrated through the discursive options each discipline makes available. Students may ultimately align themselves with or call into question the disciplinary practices they encounter. And most of us, I would assume, in one way or another, use our writing to navigate between aspects of our disciplines and our jobs that we celebrate and the aspects that we reject or question. Those emails, I'm still thinking about them. We use our writing to be part of a disciplinary community and to define our identities within it. So that's what I mean by self-actualization. Rhetorical advocacy is our second one. You can use writing to stand up for yourself and for your communities. I would not entrust Gen AI with trying to create meaningful change. It's not the way it works. Because text-based generative AI operates by converting linguistic data into binary tokens, calculating probability, and reconverting tokens back into language, it's just predisposed to the status quo. Because these tools are designed to produce language that passes, right? Language that seems likely, that's predictable, and ideas that have already been well established. The possibility for new ways of thinking and being to emerge through this type of writing is small. Gen AI can and does surprise and frustrate us sometimes, but it does not do so on behalf of our communities. It lacks subject position, purpose, and audience. It does not have the power to advocate authentically. Generative AI is designed to produce palatable, passable writing, not disruptive writing or writing that challenges structures of power. Gen AI will only reinforce dominant structures. It's inherent in its design. Lastly for today, writing to learn. This is probably our most relevant type of writing that we're going to be talking about today. Writing can help students learn across the curriculum in every single discipline, in every single class. By making space for writing in our classes, by requiring students to use writing to engage with subject material, teachers can aid students in the absorption of new information, and most critically, in making meaning out of that new information by making connections between otherwise disparate facts. Critical thinking requires this, right? This is essential for critical thinking. This is critical thinking. Without this meaning making, students will be less likely to retain knowledge and less likely to be able to apply that knowledge in novel contexts. Whatever you teach, whatever the discipline, writing will help students learn. Writing will help them succeed, and writing will help them translate that success into readiness for their next step. Go to the next slide. Thanks, Christine. Sorry. Okay, so I'm using myself as an example here for what I'm talking about. Just to illustrate how these three concepts might play out across somebody's life. So self-actualization, Gloria, I've got my dissertation on here too, because in order to apply for the job I have now, I had to be a person with a PhD. So I had to actualize, right? I had to become somebody by writing that. I put my first book on there too. That was a big kind of identity self-actualization moment for me. I put my application to be a tutor in my college writing center, something I did my first year of college as an undergraduate student, because you know what, that turned me into who I am today, right? And you know, other professionalization types of writing. Rhetorical advocacy. I don't have grants on here, although of course this is a type of rhetorical advocacy. We write grants in our writing center to fund our prison education contributions, our literary journal for incarcerated writers. That's advocacy, that's rhetorical advocacy. My scholarship is also focused on inclusive pedagogy. I consider that to be rhetorical advocacy as well. I'm also involved in labor organizing. And so telling organizing stories is one way that I use writing to advocate for my community and for the people I work with. Finally, writing to learn, things that I've written that have been essential to my learning. Reflective response papers in grad school. I would never have made sense of all that information if I hadn't been writing, you know, like 500 words on it after I read it. My dissertation, that's both in writing to learn and in self-actualization. In order to learn how to write scholarly writing, I had to do a bunch of it. Same with my creative writing. Not only did I do an MFA thesis, but I have a few manuscripts in the proverbial drawer. If anybody else here is a creative writer, you probably have that feeling as well. I needed to write them in order to learn how to write the one that actually got published. So this is how this all plays out in my life personally. Yeah, thanks, Kristen.
Okay, so we're going to return to the page here for another few minutes. In your experience and or discipline, what are some examples of writing that contributes to self-actualization, rhetorical advocacy, or learning? We'll take another couple of minutes. Great, so now I think we're going to move into, first of all, taking a little break from us talking to you and moving our bodies a little bit around the room and sharing some of the ideas that we just wrote down. So you'll find that we put up a couple of posters on the wall. What is that third one?
Down there.
Oh, okay, stop. Got it. Okay, so one's on the table down here. We'd love for y'all to share some of your experiences and ideas. You'll find Sharpies over on the small table in the corner here by self-actualization. There's rhetorical advocacy right in front of me, and writing to learn is at the end of this table. So thank you. I'll give you a few minutes. Thank you so much for engaging in this activity. We're seeing so many cool examples from y'all's experiences. Seeing slam poetry from two poets to you, big fan of that one. Under self-actualization, MFA thesis, of course, under rhetorical advocacy, seeing a lot of letters of recommendation, which is great, emails, letters to government officials, cover letters also came up. I think that's a really interesting example of a way to advocate for yourself and also write yourself into your own professional or academic future, right? And under writing to learn, I think we had cover letters again, which is an interesting way of thinking about like how to learn a genre, right? You just have to do it. Summarizing complex data, writing journal reflections to relate information to your own life. These are all really, really great ideas. Yeah. Slide, please.
You can go to the next one too. You double that. This is so great. I'm actually, I predictably totally charmed at all of the things we didn't think of that our brilliant colleagues do. Here are some examples of assignments that we've seen in classes, assignments that students have been set, that also fall into these categories too. Self-actualization might look like teaching students to write professionalization documents, literally resumes, right? Actually giving assignments in real world genres, thinking beyond the seminar paper, thinking beyond the professor as the sole audience can also really help students self-actualize. I have manifestos, and that's kind of a general category. I did have seen that kind of as an assignment in classes. Can be, some of our students are very opinionated. They could really stretch out on that one. Rhetorical advocacy. Y'all have so many more ideas on the board back there that I was able to come up with. And yeah, letters of nomination and recommendation are important. Community-based or supportive writing is another. Obviously, letters to people in power is another popular assignment as well. And then finally, writing to learn. A lot of reflective writing mentioned here, note-taking. We have summaries, outlines, journals, the students writing journals. Early attempts at new genres are going to be something I put in here too, because this is often assessed or evaluated by instructors as a product, when actually it's part of a process, part of a learning process. Yeah, but thank you for participating in that.
Okay, so now that we've identified why writing is important and how it relates to our disciplines, we wanted to talk a little bit about where students are falling into this conversation when it comes to offloading critical thinking on things like artificial intelligence and chatbots. According to research published and presented by Norton last year, here are the most common reasons students use AI. Deadline pressures. So I'm sure we're all familiar with that dark shadow that procrastination casts over good work and good writing in our classrooms. This is one of the most common reasons that students choose to not engage with an assignment because of deadline pressure, simply running out of time. Unclear value. So what does writing have to do with me and my career? Maybe particularly in a STEM field, electrical engineering, right? We see this often in the general education classroom, where students are sort of begrudgingly participating, but thinking that it doesn't have anything to do with them. Sometimes, not all the time. We love our gen ed students. But I think it's also a common problem across departments at various course levels as well. Students who don't see a real world value in some of their assignments are definitely not going to value it as much. They're not going to feel like a project is a good use of their time, especially if they're an overloaded junior or senior who are coming up on the pressures of other things from the real world. Knowledge limits. So increasingly, students are turning to chatbots to answer the questions about anything ranging from what to make for dinner and also explaining statistical concepts that the teacher introduced in class that day, right? So not understanding what's being asked of them is another really common reason why students are turning to AI. And this is related to the next one, I think, about avoiding judgment. Related to knowledge limits, they may be too embarrassed to ask for clarification from their instructors and their TAs. There may be a lot of reasons for this that are potentially personal or structural or institutional, why a student feels like they simply just can't be wrong in the classroom. When stakes are high, having a neutral, anonymous source of information like a chatbot is a pretty tempting tool. And then finally, oops, flip my page. Personalized support. The chatbot is fundamentally a sycophant, and we know this, right, from news reports. The ways that this can go wrong can be really scary, but underneath all of these stories, I think is a very real need for our students to feel supported and seen. While navigating the overwhelming sea of anonymity that is being a college student. Often their classes are huge and they're far away from home, and they might not know about the resources that are available to them yet. So what do we do? So here are the ways that we've sort of metabolized some of these common ways, reasons that bring students to AI into actionable steps that we can take as instructors in the classroom. So in order to mitigate deadline pressures, scaffolding assignments to build toward major deadlines. This is a really great tool to help encourage and build those time management skills that students are going to need as students and also in the workforce in their professional lives. Offering an automatic 24-hour extension. This is a way to reward a student for reaching out to you, right? And say, hey, if you email me, you got 24 hours, no problem. In order to increase the perceived value of assignments, it can be a good idea to communicate early to students how an assignment reflects a real-world genre. It might not be apparent to students how this genre specifically applies to them. What you can do is share your experience, right? When did you have to write an abstract? Why did that matter? And then to address knowledge limits, it's important to contextualize coursework. So why is this concept important and how does it relate to the other information that we've been learning this semester? Building in checkpoints, having conferences and offering anonymous ways for students to ask questions. Good old-fashioned pen and paper is really good for this. And sometimes increasing knowledge is as easy as making your course more accessible to multiple learning styles. Something that I've adapted in my classrooms in the past few years is posting a lesson recap on Canvas. A good rule of thumb is having the information accessible in at least 2 mediums, right? Spoken and written. This can be a really easy way to address some of those knowledge barriers that some of our students face. And one of my favorite strategies, so coming to avoiding judgment, is to ungrade low stakes writing assignments. And what this means is that it's not worth anything. It's not worth any points. You can offer a completion grade, a check mark, maybe 0 if you're grading your class on a point scale, maybe using a 0 out of 1 system where 0 means incomplete, not turned in, and 1 means complete, you did turn it in. Encouraging process over product is the sort of end goal for this type of strategy. And it's a way to decrease any perceived judgment that can happen in the classroom. And finally, for personalized support, as you may have guessed, this is where we come in. In the Writing Center, we know that your time is limited and we can't necessarily offer as many office hours as our students need. And so you can send them to us, connect them with the Writing Center. We offer course shells that you can embed into your Canvas course. And you can also incentivize visits by offering extra credit.
All right, we're going to move, skip a couple of slides just to make sure we get to implementation toward the end. I know you have the handouts in front of you, and we're happy to share these resources for anybody who's interested in going a little bit more in depth. These are some elements of successful writing assignments. Creating consistent habits, make them write more than once, offer low stakes engagement, as Miriam was just saying. Combating that fear of judgment is, ungrading goes a long way towards that. Also, just not expecting, it helps to help students sort of make that paradigm shift from writing as an event to writing as a process. We don't expect them to be good at it the first time they do it. When you think about it, that's a really ridiculous expectation, right? And so letting them try something. Let them try something without fear of punishment or bad grades. Consider doing writing in class. 5 minutes at the end of class for an exit ticket. 10 minutes once a week for reflective writing. What have you learned this week? What questions do you have? Develop connection. Writing is social. And that means that it's something that does social action, right? As we just thought, writing does something, but it also happens better when you socialize the process, when you talk to somebody, when you go to the Writing Center. You also want to give students an opportunity to connect what they're learning to their lives. And so not over-determining what topics they write about can open up avenues for students to find their own ways to the material that makes that learning more powerful. Also, seed longer projects. As professional writers, we never start with a blank page, right? You're always building off of something you've already done. And that's something that we want to share with students so that they know that the writing that they're doing in this class is going to build to something, right? So that feeds into scaffolding too. Next one. This is an example of a writing to learn incorporation in a senior capstone ecology course at a different institution. It does all of those things. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide too, just to give us a chance with our last 10 minutes to actually think about how we might apply this to our work. I think that clock's about 5 minutes fast. So incorporating writing into your existing classes can look like doing a midterm check-in, asking students to do a 5-minute write. What is the story of the semester so far? That would be a really interesting question, right? What do they think is happening in this class? You might do an open-ended mid-semester evaluation. How are we doing? Write me something. I like to hand out index cards for these so that students don't feel the pressure to write too much too. Scaffold, do one thing at a time. If you already have a writing project in your class, break it down. Break it down and help students reverse engineer that particular task. So instead of presenting them with an essay that they have to figure out how to do, make them come up with an idea, and then an outline, and then a paragraph, that kind of thing. Write to learn and build community. You might consider incentivizing writing center visits, right? Send them to talk to somebody. Peer review. We can help structure this too if folks have questions about how to conduct a peer review in their classes. I also really like this active learning technique called pass a problem. I also use index cards for this. Paper's just fine. Have students spend 10 minutes writing down all the questions they have about their class. And then you pass the paper around, and every time a student sees a question they know the answer to, they write down the answer. And so you're actually soliciting knowledge from the group, decentering the teacherly authority, and helping students articulate tacit knowledge so that they can actionize it, or act upon it. And finally, teaching for transfer. One of the hardest things in teaching is helping students to make connections between what they already know and what they're doing now, and between what they're learning now and what they're going to do next year. And so some ways that you can use writing in order to create those transfer skills and help to strengthen those transfer skills for students are things like write a letter to your future self. Don't forget, this is important. You might have some reflective writing to review content before a final. You might put an essay question on your final. Maybe it's just 5 points. Asking students to identify which information or skills they'll need for future classes or work opportunities. So for our final last couple of moments, and we'll just do this for 2 minutes, or maybe back one more. Sorry about that. No, it's all good. Thanks, Kristen. Thank you so much for your absolutely virtuosic management of the slides today. This is really great. Appreciate you. Let's think about how you might try one of these. How might you incorporate this type of writing into your work this semester? If you had to choose one, how would you do it? Not midterms yet. I'll take one minute just for folks to kind of free write in response to this. Also, having people write in response to questions in your classes prepares more people to engage. Not everybody can answer a question right off the top of their head. Giving folks a second to write it out before you ask them to participate verbally is a way to get more people engaged. All right, just out of curiosity, just show of hands, how many folks were considering incorporating a midterm check-in? Okay, cool. How many folks were thinking one thing at a time? All right, cool, thanks, appreciate that. How about writing to learn and build community? Nice, yeah, that's one of my faves. Teaching for transfer. Nice, yeah, thanks. Cool. I would love to hear more. I would love to hear questions. We have 2 minutes left. Yeah, we can go ahead and advance to our references and our, yeah, let's feel free to reach out too. Today's not the day. Yeah, Kelly.
Do you have any resources? Because I like in-class writing, but I know a lot of students are nervous about their handwriting. Do you have any resources for handwriting practice? Just because some of my students are like, I type everything, my handwriting's awful. I won't read it. I don't want to do this. So how do we get them to practice that?
I personally, I tell them that I used to be a middle school teacher and they don't scare me and I want to see it, you know,
Yeah.
that's my move, but yeah, you know, I haven't thought about that. How do you handle that?
Oh, I'm encountering that a little bit right now in my current class. You know, I think this is maybe paired with the low stakes writing question, because if I can't read it, it still gets a check mark. You know, in terms of encouraging handwriting practice, I don't know, you know, I feel like a little bit sensitive of like what's my scope and what's not my scope as a teacher. And I'd like to think that just practicing more will help. And just being aware that somebody is going to read it will help. So that's usually my approach. I don't know if that totally is satisfactory.
We see a lot of folks, the number one phrase we hear in the writing center is I'm bad at writing. And so I am also curious about these students' experiences and whether their handwriting has been a target of criticism and something that was used to kind of denigrate them or run them down as writers too. So I wonder, I feel like a lot of students might have that baggage too.
I think we have time for one more.
So, do you ever hear the phrase, why do I have to write from there with AI?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All the time.
And what do you do about it?
We talk about like, don't give up your power. Don't give your power away to the robots. Like we live in a hyperliterate society and writing matters. And if you can't stand up for yourself, nobody's going to. So not to be dire about it. Like I'll stand up for you, but no. Maybe one more.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be like, whatever, but does the writing center or either of you have definition of what is writing? I work with some people who are neurodivergent, and writing notes like this on a page is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
Finding the right keys on a keyboard is nearly impossible because people are brilliant. And so they'll use like text to speech, or they'll use some of their tools.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if, what your thoughts on what is writing?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I feel greedy here. I'm like, all of it, give that to me, everything. Yeah, no, we absolutely consider speech to text, even speech recordings without a text component to be writing. It's composed, it's thoughtful, it's communication, it's verbal. Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to talk about revision, right?
Right.
Then we
Right.
how's a word processing software going to help you take this draft into the next step to closer, you know, approach the genre that it needs to be in? Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to talk about that.
Every single person has a different writing process, and maybe that includes assistive or adaptive technology. So how does it fit into your process? Yeah. It's all writing, except math. I don't know where Tim Baster is right now. It's lit, right? Yeah, you know. Yeah.
True.
Right? Exactly. This is what I mean when I go into class. I'm like, you can't get away from it, you know? Yeah.
And often you need to use words.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Our graduate students graduating in STEM fields, trying to format their dissertations in LaTeX with their text and their equations.
Well, this is another point. They come back to us in the graduate writing center, you know, and if they didn't take advantage of writing support in undergrad, they're gonna have a cold, hard, you know, problem to deal with when they get a little bit further in their academic career. So that's maybe another thing to talk about when you're faced with that question, you know, why does this matter? Because you're gonna need to know how to do it eventually. Yeah.
I just laugh, say they're going into the sciences to quit writing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't well enough to know that I'm not laughing in a mean way, but
Right. Yeah.
it's just not him.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for coming to our session.
Thank you.